Are there things that a student should avoid when they're applying to a residency or specialty program, or for a job? Is there anything that's out there that's taboo that is the kiss of death, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I would think anytime you gossip about a former employer or about your program, I think it's incredibly important to keep it positive at all times when you're interacting with individuals. So, keep it more on the professional side, as you probably know. Definitely make sure that you don't do this sort of backbiting or turn it into sort of a casual conversation. Try to make sure that you're always keeping the conversation professional when you're having lunch with the person. You don't divulge or overshare too much information. So I think it's important not to overshare as well. I would say treat it like a dialogue, when you're interacting with people, not a monologue, and really ask pertinent questions. I think it's so incredibly important that you cull information out from them. I think actually the art of real communication, very often in controlling an interview situation or a dialogue, is in asking questions. So I think that is something that's so incredibly important. So I would say I'm coming at it from the point of what you should do, but also on the other side, as you can see, if you're controlling the conversation or if you're talking impertinently about a previous employer or a residence program, incredibly important to keep it positive at all times.
I'm glad you brought that up.
It's simple. It's a simple maxim, but it's just so incredibly true.
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned over the years is, and your verbiage is perfect because it's one of my favorite phrases, and that's that you can control a conversation when you talk too much, you tell a lot of stories. You can dominate a conversation when you do that, but you can control a conversation when you start asking more questions and engaging.
Absolutely.
So when you say to ask targeted questions that are important, are there one or two of those questions that a student should be sure to ask, or is it different based on whoever their audience is?
Well, I think it's different based upon whoever their audience is. On one hand, you certainly want to look at your target audience at all times. However, you also should have some standard questions that you would want to ask. Definitely asking them about what they enjoy. Say you're meeting with an employer or you're meeting with someone from a program. What do you enjoy particularly about this program? What is the key thing that makes this experience the most fruitful and beneficial? How would I possibly, based upon my qualifications, fit into this scheme of things? I think always having questions in your back pocket from doing your research is going to be incredibly important. So the questions are based on research you've done about the person or the company, and also, based upon your own needs as the conversation evolves.
Okay.
So it may not be a conversation in person. So you might want to maximize whatever you do through email as well and really cultivate that. And even if you wanted to speak with someone else outside the program, if you have a mentor or you're working, for instance, if they're working with you and you know a little bit about it, that they definitely should be asking questions of other people before they just jump in and impulsively kind of go on go madcap on a random goose chase with their job search.
Gotcha. So the fact that we've designed probably a dozen or so questions for them to ask, that's going to be a good thing, be helpful for them?
Very, very helpful. That's exactly what I do with my population as well that I work with.
Okay. Well, on the flip side of it, we talked about positives and negative things that you can do to prepare and positive questions you can ask. Are there questions that you absolutely shouldn't ask, things that are red flags to the director of a residency or a specialty program?
Some guffaws. Absolutely. Talking about benefits, talking about salary too early in the equation it's definitely a guffaw, I would say. Another guffaw would be to, really share too much about yourself. You want to paint yourself initially in broad strokes and then go in for the specifics. I think telling them too much. Well, let's just say, I know some of my clients when I'm doing interview coaching with them, and I ask them the standard "tell me about yourself" question, the 60-second bio intro. Everyone knows as different things like the elevator pitch and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they'll go into specifics way too soon, and they go into dense, kinds of theoretical terms. And I think it's really important to give a person a general picture and then go into those specifics. But really know thyself. I think that's incredibly important.
Okay.
And you can arrive at some of that through aptitude testing. Through looking at different differential aptitude tests, as I'd mentioned, personality tests, really grasp all of the career counseling materials that are out there to know your individual personality type and how it's going to meld with a specific environment or practice.
Okay.
So I think that's incredibly important. But to go back to the guffaws, because I don't want to forget about that. I know.
That's okay.
10 interview killers. Well, I think asking an employer, so when do I start? That's kind of a little bit of a cliche. You really don't want to just be overly eager either and overly you want to treat it like it's a dialogue. And I think sometimes what candidates will do is they try too hard to please. They're too concerned about impressions. You want it, just like our conversation right now, you want it to be, kind of a nice interaction, a comfortable, calm interaction. So you don't want to come across too aggressively. I think sometimes people will occasionally do that. Maybe they're over-prepared in a way. You want to prepare, but you also want to have a natural kind of, flow to the situation and to your experiences with each person. So that's incredibly important. Oh, the other thing you don't want to do is complain about parking, directions, when you're going to a prospective business or practice. Even if you've had difficulty trying to find the place, you really don't want to, be grouching and groveling and being upset about the fact that you couldn't find it or that you had difficulty with any part of the process, because this person is lending their time to you, so really be gracious about that.
So leave any and all baggage at the door.
Yes, leave any and all baggage at the door. That's the best way to coin it.
Okay.
That encapsulates all of it. Yeah, and asking questions like, inappropriate questions like, do you do a drug test? These are just general interview questions you don't want to ask. Obviously, that's a red flag, right?
Gotcha.
Like asking for things up front in terms of not just salary, but what the benefits are. The other thing is like, can I wait until I start the job? I think questions like I have to take vacation up front. You just don't want to over ask. This is an employer, and it's largely an employer's market. So you want to make sure that you're coming at it from a what can I do for you standpoint, not so much from a what can you do for me one.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly important.
And I would
bring to the table.
Right. What you just said is key too. There are far more students who want to get into a residency or a specialty program than maybe there are spots. So competition is a bit stiff, and our goal is to help our students not only get into a program, but get into the program that they'd like to get into. So I have one more question for you for the actual interview process. And you alluded to it earlier, which reminded me of it. And that's, if I'm a student and I'm sitting in front of you and I think it's going well, is there a way for me to showcase who I am, to really shed a light on myself without sounding cocky or arrogant?
Yes.
How do I do that if I'm a student?
I think experience and your presentation or portfolio will speak for itself. I don't think you necessarily need to say, well, I've done this and I've done that. But I think if you have a really nice portfolio with a number of letters of recommendation, some references, some specifics about your track record of success spelled out. Your resume should say some of that, but I think you can point to those specifics. And I just think your experience, your success, you shouldn't have to oversell yourself if you have everything in order that you need. If you have all of those materials and you have people to attest and provide recommendations on LinkedIn or on any other site, on your site potentially as well. So I think it's incredibly important to, prepare. The other thing is prepare stories and case scenarios of how you assisted, whether it be a resident or a patient or what have you. You want to look at storytelling in your process when you're doing an interview. And when you're starting to go into specifics a little bit more, you definitely want to captivate your audience by telling a story, because there's nothing like creative storytelling that really, calls up the imagination and makes them really get a visual of what a day would be like with you on the job.